Honestly unbalanced.
You've been to London not that long ago, end of last year. You were in London. Two things I'd love to know. First, I'd love to know about your experience in London, but you experienced particularly Lidos, like the great British tradition of Lidos, which actually not that many people use anymore, except in the very small communities that they are within. But you also said you made friends for life. So I'd love to so the two questions are, like maybe you can talk a little bit about your London experience and the cold water community or the cold exposure community, and also how that community enabled you to get friends for life on quite a quick trip. Because when most people think of cold exposure, people think of like lonely people in an ice bath in their garden or in a river, not community.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I went to London in December. And really I probably wouldn't have gone, but I have a mother who loves traveling, but a father who does not. And he some trips he'll let her he's comfortable with her going on by herself, and then other ones he's like, it'd be better if you went with somebody. And my mom loves to see all of the sites and the museums and the cathedrals, and um just researching the history, and she's a big music person, and I'm the only other one in the family that has any kind of musical genes. And so she knows that I love to go sit. I'll go sit in in St. Paul's with her and listen to the evensongs or
Mm.
the organ recitals and that type of stuff. And so um we did that, and she especially wanted to go because it was near Christmas, and so all the more festive celebration or decorations were up. And so that was kind of the reason why I went. And I thought, you know what, it would be really cool while I'm out there to, because this is, I mean, first international trip I've made since the account even got started and since I started posting or anything. And so I thought, hey, I'll just start throwing out a bunch of stories on my page, just like, hey, London folks, let me know if you're around, if you have any suggestions for good places to cold plunge. And a lot of the Lidos had been, you said Lido, right? Or is it
Yeah.
Lido? Okay,
No,
Lido.
Lido,
We say
Lido.
Um,
Lido.
yeah. So that's another thing. Yeah, like I was very new to that concept, but it looks like there's a lot of like 20th century history with Lidos, and how they evolved over time. And some of them, like the one we went to was the Hampstead Heath one,
Mm.
um, it has been there for a long time. And there's a lot of history behind it, and a lot of old photos of people where pools and group settings like that became more popular. And so it was really, really cool to read and research some of that, and then to go. And so I probably had about 20 people who initially responded, and they were like, yes, I'd love to meet you there. Like, let me know when you're going. And so I thought, awesome, like, let's do it. Let's get a group together. And um, so we did that. The numbers kind of whittled down as it got closer, right? Just with people having things going on. But we ended up with, I think, six people that showed up from, some of them rode the tube like an hour or so to get there. But it was just super fun to meet up with a bunch of people and do it as a community, and then hear some of their stories and where they were from, and jump in the sauna afterwards because they have a whole sauna that's there as well. And a lot of my videos, most of my videos are by myself, because that's just the nature of my life is most of the time I'm doing it by myself. And um but it is such an incredible community social tool. It really is. And I think it's the type of thing, cold plunging and sauna as well, that you're doing things that are difficult and that put your body under stress together. And so there's a natural bonding element that comes with that. And so in my opinion, I also think there's a little bit more of an initiative to be vulnerable as well, because you're already doing something tough together. And so you kind of feel this natural bond to just share more. And so some of I take this phrase from Eric Hinman, who's another, he's big on sauna and he's another influencer. more in the fitness space, but some of the best conversations he's ever had and that I've ever had have been in the sauna or
Hmm.
before and after a cold plunge because you really get to know people and so I think that's a type of social setting that I would love to see just grow globally over the next few years.
Do you think that maybe this has inspired you to start your own community back at home then, rather than do it by yourself?
Yeah, there's a few, and there's a little bit of like difficulty with that just I think just logistically for
Mm.
me, I'm already doing everything I can just to try and get this like just create the platform and maintain it and do everything myself because I'm still, working a full-time job and handling other responsibilities and duties, right? And um but I have been helping at events here locally in Idaho probably probably once a quarter. And that's been a lot of fun to do and just to meet new people around and the city I live in, Boise, is already pretty small. And so you start to connect with people from just different areas and realize how small the community really is. And so it's a lot of fun. But I do want to start trying to create more of a community around it and hopefully building um kind of an email list per se, right? Of just a group of people like, hey, let's go do a cold plunge at this time or sauna at this time, and just create little events that are free and like just
Mm.
fun for people that want to get together and um, you know, and
Nice.
socialize. Yeah.
I love what you said there. I'd never considered it in this sense. I've always thought there is huge value in choosing to do hard things willingly, whether that be like a marathon, whether that be spending time in a sauna. And I think a lot of growth comes from that. And you kind of force yourself through growth. Uh, but I've never in any way thought about it, how it links people together and how it can
Mm.
build community and how people can open up through it. That thought never crossed my mind. And then reflecting back, it's completely true. Like I've had some of the best conversations ever on like walking the Camino de Santiago, where people are like struggling each day to a degree, even as a child. Like like I was a cadet, so like in the RAF, but for children, and we'd go on like night expeditions, and you're all shivering cold, and you'd have these amazing. I think like someone came out once, in the
Oh.
night, like amazing conversations, like by a fire that you was crap because no one knew how to build a fire. But that's completely true, isn't it? That people open up and express their vulnerability in these challenging situations.
Yeah, and that wasn't something I knew from the start either, right? It just kind of happened with a little bit more experience and um it's like raising a child, right? It's the same thing. You guys grow together and feel more bonded because of that shared experience and I'm not a parent or anything, so I can't really say, but the the other part is the motivational aspect too, is doing an ice bath or a cold plunge is already hard enough. It's so hard, and trying to get out of your head and convince yourself to do it is very difficult. And that's why I think cold showers are especially difficult for people to do because you're just in there by yourself in just kind of a closed off room and it's
Mm.
just a fight with you in your head.
I
And
find them
and
harder, cold showers.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's a huge piece of it is it's so easy to rationalize and change your mind when you're in there. There's nothing stopping you from it. Whereas doing it in a setting or with a group of people, loved ones, whoever, there's a motivational aspect that's going to come into play that I think is super, super helpful.
Has it gotten easier over time? I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but is it as difficult now as it was at the start?
It's definitely not as difficult, no. I think it's similar to, I would say it's similar to cardiovascular exercise, any type of cardio exercise, um, in the sense that your body starts to adapt very quickly, but then you also lose that adaptation very quickly if you
Mhm.
Yeah,
stop
yeah.
doing it. And so, if I'm doing it 3 to 4 times a week, I feel pretty accustomed. The mental aspect
Mm.
never goes away. that the mental difficulty and the challenge of getting yourself to do it, that part never goes away. I get out, into the river all the time and I'm just like, man, trying to fight myself just to sit down. But the physical response, the physiological response, I do find, yeah, gets a little bit easier over time. So that yeah, yeah.
I would love to ask you in a minute about the stages of you getting into it. But before that, just want a little shout out to where you were, Hampstead. If you'd have gone slightly up the hill, there's a famous thing called the Hampstead Ponds. So they are. Did you come across them at all?
Yes, but didn't go there because I think they were either closed to the public or they were. I'm trying to remember if it's the shared pond or sorry, I think they call it the mixed
Yeah.
pond, and then the other one. So I didn't end up going there, but I did look into them just a little bit.
They are this long-standing community of, what might appear to be nutters who all through the year will just go into either the female pond, the male pond, the mixed pond, and jump in, have a swim. And there is a documentary about this called The Ponds. I'm sure it's on Netflix. I'm sure if you can't get it, you can VPN your way into it. But it's called The Ponds, and it is the most beautiful, cathartic, wholesome Sunday documentary about this unique community of people that I guess are bonded by the unique challenge of, particularly in the winter, getting in this freezing cold water in the middle of London. But it's beautiful. Just a little recommendation there.
I need to look it up.
The
Yeah, I didn't know it
Ponds.
was on Netflix. That's awesome. Okay.
Can we talk about the first time you ever did this and why? Because I feel like people need to know this. I want to know your story. How did it all happen and why?
Oh, well, I guess it depends how far back we want to go. So I I mean, I guess we'll go back to childhood.
Yeah, let's go there.
Well, because it kind of starts with some history, and I've always been very neurodivergent, very I had some diagnoses when I was 9, general anxiety, Tourette syndrome, OCD, and so that kind of set the stage for like this search early on for any type of tools I could use to cope with my conditions, to self-regulate, um, to just try and handle my state on a day-to-day basis. And in the early days, the solution was pretty much medication because it was 90s, early 2000s. There wasn't much of an understanding of what could be done, especially with children, um, and so very early on, it was always medication. And I think eventually got to a point where I've tapered off of some medication. I'm still on others, and I'm trying to taper off some now. Um, but when I moved up to Idaho. I just finished grad school, 2020. Um, and I got hit with about a depression that was just like caught me completely off guard. Like I'd never experienced that level of depression, lack of motivation, feeling of hopelessness, futility, lack of purpose, all of it. And at that stage of my life, I was not turning to any more medication. And so it began this search of anything and everything that could possibly help with my condition, and what I was experiencing day to day. And that, was things like changing my diet, eating less processed foods, going to more whole foods, setting a sleep schedule, getting a lot more exercise in, doing sauna, um, trying to socialize more, get more physical face-to-face interaction, sunlight, all sorts of things. And one day I had a buddy come to visit me. So this is 2021. I'd already been in Boise about a year. There's not a lot of sun here. It's honestly in the summer there is, but when it's not summer, it's like London. I mean, it's just not a lot of sunlight. And so I struggled for like a year, and in I think early 2021, I had a buddy come visit me, and he saw how close I lived to the Boise River, which is just this nice, small, calm river. Some spot deep enough in a lot of spots, and pristine, just clean, awesome river that runs right through the heart of downtown, in and out of the city. And he saw I lived like less than 100 yards from it, and was like, dude, do you go in here at all? Do you ever jump in? And I was like, no. Like, I walk past it sometimes. Like, that's about it. He's like, I would be in here every morning. I would just be in here feeling the water, grounding with the earth, enjoying nature to start my day. And then he asked if I had ever heard of Wim Hof or heard of Yes Theory, Seek Discomfort, these groups that had worked with Wim Hof, kind of done some cold exposure, ice baths, all that. And I was like, no. And so that kind of began a whole other um, research for me to kind of learn more about it. And so I did my first ice bath July 2021, and pretty immediately just became hooked because it was a extended release feeling of happiness, of calm, just composure. Like everything, all the scattered thoughts and everything happening would just kind of align and become much more easy to tackle one at a time, and just a central nervous system reset. And so I just started doing it regularly. I mean, 3, 4 times a week. Went and bought like a little tub at like a farm supply store, um and did that for the whole summer, and got to the point of winter in 2021 and thought, you know what? I'm gonna be in the river all winter. I'm gonna do it 3, 4 times a week all winter, just commit to myself and follow through. And so did that, got all the way through winter. And it wasn't until the following July 2022 was when I started my page. So I'd done it for about a full year, just experiencing it myself. And then in 2022, I thought, as I was scrolling through Instagram, um, nobody's talking about the mental health side of this and the impact it could have for folks who are just looking for new tools, new ways to learn to cope, adapt with stress, and thrive. And so that's when I started everything with my page, was July 2022.
And what is it, or how does it affect your mental health? I guess there's two layers to that. There is the chemicals that could be released when you're in it, but also, talk. I know you spoke on your account about the sense of control and the fact that water, you know what it's going to do. It's a constant to some degree. So maybe talk about the layers in which actually it helps.
Yeah. So from a scientific side, and I'm not a doctor, I more just a practitioner, right? Just something I love to do. But there's the physiological response is intense, and your vascular system constricts really tight. All your blood vessels constrict really tight to preserve any body heat you have. Blood rushes to your core, and it's just trying to save your life. And in that process, you have a spike in adrenaline and epinephrine, norepinephrine, and that whole process, as you go through it and learn to bring down your breath rate and your heart rate, you then get hit with the dopamine and the feel good endorphins that will last for hours afterwards. And it does all that. What's interesting about it is it does all that without significantly increasing your cortisol levels. Um, Other forms of, this type of experience, you spike cortisol, and that's kind of a negative stress hormone you don't really want. And so that's what's so interesting about it, is that you can do all that without spiking your cortisol. And so from a science standpoint, that's become pretty clear. And I think there's a lot of research that still needs to be done around all of these things they call cold shock proteins, and how they change and affect your body as you go through cold shock. There's so much research that's going on or has been done recently about that. But yeah, the science is young, but it's become pretty clear that it's it's really helpful also from a therapeutic standpoint of learning to tackle difficult things and put yourself in an environment where it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be hard, and it's very similar, very synonymous to other areas of life where you get caught off guard, Something surprises you. There's a confrontation. There's a really loud noise. Anything that might spike your heart rate, cause you to clench up and go into a fight or flight response. You can start to learn how to harness your breathing to get yourself back under control and then respond rationally to that type of situation. We've always had these situations where we get out of it and we think, man, I wish I handled that better. I really wish I handled that better. And I like to look at this as a controlled stress environment where I can practice my response to some sort of overstimulation or difficulty that I might not see coming in the future.
Cool.
I was just going to say, have you noticed a huge impact on your mental health personally then since starting?
Yeah, and there's it's hard to say, like, because the baseline for me has been changing a lot lately, just with things I've been sharing. There's been a lot of change in my life, and new things I'm trying to tackle that has kind of made things difficult. But from the start, yes, it was something that I could rely on to help me get out of a funk and to kind of bring myself back to just a balanced state. If I'm having it, if I'm having a hard day, I'm having an anxiety attack, my thoughts are racing, something crazy is happening. One of the easiest ways for me to get out of that is to just go jump in the river. And it's like, that's just, so it became something that I could use to try and reset. And yeah, I mean, continuously for 2, 3, 4 hours after, I can feel calm. I can feel composed, relaxed, energetic, yet, just happy, not overbearing, not too much.
I could be putting words into your mouth here, but do you find that it kind of brings you to the present moment? As you said, because you're trying to almost survive, and that's it, and stay alive while you're in there. There is nothing
100%.
else to be concerned about. And you shared a story on your social media about a guy telling you weren't okay. Like, he could see you in the water, and he was saying to you, I know you think you're okay, but you're not okay. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, and like in a different setting, I would have been like, "You're right, I'm not okay." But in that setting, yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, yes, it is. Um, and that's kind of how I started to use it from a depression standpoint before I even started posting anything about it. It's like all the thoughts were so overwhelming, and I couldn't find a way to get out of it. But if it's February and I go jump in that river and it's, 4 degrees, 3 degrees Celsius, um, I can't possibly think about anything else happening outside of that moment, um, besides just trying to survive and trying to breathe and trying to get through it. And so it very much brings you into a present state of, geez, I just need to try and survive. That's it. And it kind of reprioritizes those things that you were so stressed about, you're so worried about, you feel so hopeless about. It reprioritizes those and to realize, like, helping you realize I'm okay right now. I'm okay. Like, this is really hard. I'm gonna get out of it, and then realize that all those things are just these little tiny flies that are actually just kind of bothering me. They're not, you know, it's not a dinosaur trying to devour me, right? But that man, yes, it was so interesting because it was that first winter before I was making any content at all. And so I always just have to tell the story because I have no footage of it, like, because I wasn't making anything. Um, but it was just an older gentleman, and it was 2021, right? So it was a little bit early into the craze around cold plunging, and so he most definitely was not expecting to see somebody sitting in there while it's snowing and it's basically dark in the morning, and and I had to reassure him that I was okay. I was fine. I do it all the time. And um but it was kind of an interesting uh I don't know. It was just kind of an interesting moment because those were all the things that I was fighting myself internally. This idea that I'm not okay, and something's out to get me, or I'm just struggling with myself and who I am. And at that moment, it just kind of clicked that it was the whole reason I was doing this, was to
Mm.
just fight that idea that, oh, I'm not okay, and I can't do hard things, and I can't overcome, and all of that. So it was an interesting
That's
time.
so interesting. It's like he came along to challenge you, like a mirror or something.
Yeah, and it's kind of like when um there's a person in your life who, when they tell you to do something, you just get mad because you don't want to do what they say just because of whoever they are, right? And in any other situation, you would do it, but because they told you not, to do it or not to do it, then you do the opposite. It was kind of one of those moments where it was like, hey, I'm already telling myself that I'm not okay. Like, because you said that, I'm
I'm
like, I'm gonna
fine.
fight with
I'm
you. Yeah,
great.
exactly. So it was kind of funny in that way.
It seems that there's so many people that have, internal conflicts that use their body to deal with that and process it, or temporarily distract themselves from it. Like most ultra runners, like David Goggins is the perfect example. No one can think of it. The only one I know that isn't, that's quite famous, is Ross Edgley. Have you come across him? The guy that swam around the UK. He's featured on some National Geographic stuff. He literally swam around the UK,
Uh,
and has done obscene things. And he's just a happy-go-lucky, jolly guy. But it seems that most people who train hard or like have things that they're dealing with inside, and it's a really useful tool, and perhaps is the first tool that one should use. Like maybe the access to the body is the first thing one should use before we take drugs. Perhaps it depends on the situation, but before we seek therapy, is sleep well and exercise and connect with the most tangible part of the universe you have access to, which is your physical body.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think you start with the basics, right? And you start with what we were what we had in the very beginning of all this, which was nature. It was sunlight, it was what's
Mm.
around us, it was the humans around us, and the social aspect, um the whole foods, the whole, just everything about earth and nature, right? And so I think starting at that level first is really important. Yeah. Um I think, I talk to my mom all the time about what was going through her head, and then what was going through mine too when I was 9 years old, and we made the decision to put me on Paxil to help
Mm.
with the anxiety attacks. Um, and it's hard when you only have so many resources
Mhm.
and so much information. I think a huge that's a huge caveat to everything, is like you need to have information about things. And at the time, it, I would become so paralyzed, so scared, um, around doing tasks at school and having a clear set of instructions, or just step by step guide of how to do something, that if it wasn't clear to me and it wasn't very laid out, I would just go into kind of this paralyzed shock where I just thought, I can't do it. It's not possible. It's too new. It's too foreign. And so she, to this day, and I don't blame her at all, because it was just with the information she had, it made sense. She says, to this day, she's like, I will never regret that decision, because when we put you on that, it made such a difference, and all of a sudden you could learn in school and you could function, and it wasn't causing you to need to leave the classroom. Um and so it just very much is customized to who you are and to what your situation is. But starting with, like you said, the basics. Are we getting sleep? Are we getting quality, consistent sleep and following a clear schedule? Are we removing as much processed food, refined food from our diet to try and help with that as well? Because I mean, our gut is like our brain,
Mm.
and they're so connected. And so that's something that I fought the idea of for a long time, was that my gut was somehow connected to my brain. But of course it is. So what you put in your body, of course, is going to have an impact on your mental health. It just,
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, it took me 30 years to even believe that. It was like, who's going to tell me a bag of Doritos is going to cause depression? Like, I mean, show me that. Like, but anyways, yeah, I couldn't agree more about all of that.
How have your kind of family been or friends with your sudden notoriety as someone that is so open with what's going on internally?
Very supportive. I don't think I've had any friends or family who haven't been supportive. I think they've all been very supportive, and I think that's because they know um that I've always been that type of person that just has just shared everything up front and wanted to be very clear, and even had a difficult time like interpreting social cues and sarcasm and things like that. So it was like I always wanted to just say exactly how things were because that's how I understood things. And so they've been very supportive, always have been, um, because I think they see that what I'm sharing and the journey I'm sharing really is just me sharing what I'm dealing with, and because that's really the only way I could keep it consistent and sustainable is to just share exactly what's happening on a daily basis with myself. And so yeah, that's I'm fortunate. I feel very fortunate that they've been able to support me as much as they have just in the process, and um as I've just yeah, as it's all happened.
That's stunning to have that support.
I'm so sorry. Our little boy's crying downstairs, so I'm going to
Oh,
pop
go
down,
get
but you
him.
continue.
Yeah.
Sorry, we've got a little bit. We just hear a vague
It's
scream,
okay.
and then Holly just had to peek at the baby monitor, and yeah, we heard that. But how wonderful it is that you have, yeah, family and friends that are supportive of this, because it could have gone both ways. I've seen people like yoga teachers and alike share stuff, and it kind of it triggers people. I shared once with, and again, not in a big way, but when I was boxing, I would have never in a million years identified myself as bulimic. But the reality was, to cut weight, I would make myself vomit, and that would be quite a regular thing. Or I'd go out, have a massive meal, and think, well, that's going to be another 4 hours in the gym. It's much easier to just spend 10 minutes now getting it out. And when I revealed that on social media, I thought, just nothing of it because it wasn't a big deal in my head. But actually, some of my family members were like, "Oh my god, why didn't we know that? You should have shared that with us first." So how nice it is that they are supportive in that sense. I would love to go down like on a more finite level. What goes in your head, as a sweeping generalization at each stage of your ice bath journey, and maybe actually rather than talk about it now that you're multiple years in, maybe you can reflect back on the first year and imagine you are someone newer to it again. So at each stage that I kind of go through, and I would love you to kind of describe. So your stage one is, I guess, getting in that car and driving to the location. Okay. And what's going through your head at that point? And is there a temptation to just lock the car back up and go to bed?
Yeah, I think the hardest part, so the first time I did an ice bath was with a friend. Um, I don't know if I would have done it if I were just by myself, because it's hard to fight yourself to do it. There's a lot of rationalizing that happens, and yeah, I like to think the hardest part of all of it isn't stepping into the water. It's actually getting out of the door in the
Mm.
first place, because uh, that for me, that's the pivotal moment that like I'm gonna do it or I'm not gonna do it. Um, but yeah, in the beginning it took a little bit of work to like just get the ice bath. And I think that holds a lot of people from trying it too, is um I had to tell myself I'm going to the farm supply store. I'm going to go get one of these big stock tanks that is normally for cattle and animals. I'm going to go to the gas station, go buy 100 pounds of ice. I'm going to find a location with a hose. I'm going to fill it up with a hose. There's all this like logistical stuff that you have to do if you don't have access to a body of water that's cold, which is most folks. And go ahead.
I was going to say, and those logistical problems continue even when you have a bath. Like getting the ice is actually quite a challenge and can be quite costly. I got into the habit of using condoms because I realized you can fill them with water, they expand a huge amount, and and you can reuse them to some degree. But that suddenly my whole freezer was full of condoms. There was no room for food. Like the logistics continue beyond just getting the location, don't they?
I had never heard the condoms thing, but the like I'd hear people do that with water bottles. They'd freeze water bottles and then but that's super funny. Yeah, that's an efficient way to do it too. So you're not spending money on ice and you can just I mean you could probably reuse them too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's funny.
And then stage two, then. So let's have the scenario, not where you're going to a river, but you've got an ice bath near your house or like. Stage two is that moment of stepping in, because at that point, perhaps just before, especially if the bath is at your house, there can be lots of the procrastination. Oh, I need to trim that plant a little bit. Oh, actually, I probably just need to check an email a few more times or put the bins out. Talk about conquering that phase to the point in which you actually step in.
Yeah, there's a lot of mental struggle. I think the biggest thing I don't remember much about fighting myself to actually get in because I had someone with me. And so
Mm.
they knew we were going to do it and so it became easier to follow through because I had someone with me. So I think that's a huge part. Um the actual getting in aspect, yes, is difficult. And I heard that breathing was going to be a huge part of that. And so I felt like I was prepping myself a little bit beforehand with some very deep breaths, just trying to feel like I was fully oxygenated, like I wasn't going to get as caught off guard and out of breath by jumping in. And so I did some breath work. And what I remember getting in though is you get in and this happens for a lot of folks too, is your extremities, your feet, ankles, your hands, they hurt a little bit because it's so cold you're not used to it and your body's not used to having to constrict those blood vessels so tight. And so there's a little bit of pain associated with that. And that was something that I did not know was going to happen. I thought it was just going to be cold, right? And so that was something that I was like, oh man, that actually kind of hurts. That's weird. And so it was a mental battle in the sense that I wasn't fighting the cold shock. I felt like I was fighting a little bit of pain at first and trying to overcome that aspect. And so hopefully that doesn't deter people from trying it, but because that does go away over time. That is something that as you do it a little bit more and your body starts to adapt a little bit, I notice the pain goes away very quick. And you can also help mitigate that by just not wiggling. I found if you
Mm.
are wiggling your feet and your toes and your hands and all of that, that it actually gets worse. And so,
And
um,
that's because it circulates. Your body naturally, of course, heats the water immediately around it, and the moment you wiggle, you introduce more cold water back into the equation, don't
yeah, and there's something internally too, about it, about moving.
you? Okay.
So yes, there is the aspect of like a thermal layer that kind of builds around your skin when you sit in there and you don't move. You do kind of have a temperature shield where your body develops this little layer of warmer water, and so shaking around that water can be very difficult and kind of reintroduce that cold shock. And so I recommend it. That's why I use the river is because that current strips all the body heat
Yeah.
away. Um,
It's
and
about
so it's a little bit more brutal, right?
mm.
But yeah, there's something that has to do with the vasoconstriction where wiggling, I don't know what it is, maybe just does something with the muscles or with the veins, the blood vessels, and it just kind of hurts more. I don't know.
Well, it could be that it stimulates even more blood flow, and that caused it. Who knows? Either
Yeah.
way, it hurts, and I learned that the hard way as well, not by being in a river, but I have an ice bath that has a chiller attached, and I left that on when I got in. You're supposed to turn it off, also for ozone reasons, because my mine
Mm.
creates, Anyway, got in and then realized I had the inlet going directly at my junk. And I was like, I'm in there now. I'm not getting out to turn it off. And that was my worst ice bath experience to date. That cold water flowing, and I'm not in any way experienced as you are. That was
Yeah.
my worst.
No, it's brutal. And there's companies out there. Blue Cube Baths is one that's here in the States, in Oregon, and they specialize around that idea of, hey, let's try and replicate a river current
Oh wow.
at multiple speeds to see how difficult we can make this. And so they've actually had me come in a few times and like, hey, we want you to test this out um at 37 degrees. I think it's like, what, 2 degrees Celsius,
Wow.
something like that. And let's just crank up the flow on it to see what your thoughts are of how it replicates the river you go in. And it's brutal because it actually adds another aspect to it. Is not only are you breaking that thermal layer with all this current, this water just being pushed at you, but it's a little bit different from a river in the sense that when I'm in a river, usually I sit against the current. The current's coming from behind me, hitting my back,
Okay.
and there's a little bit of warm water that kind of stays in my chest area in my front because I'm blocking the current in the front. And these machines, the way they just blast this water at you, it then ricochets off of all the sides of the tubs.
Oh
And so
wow.
there is no thermal layer anywhere on your body because it ricochets and just breaks everything from every angle. And so it becomes like even more difficult, in my opinion,
And
than
are
just
they
a river.
designed to be the kind of tub you would have at home? I guess they're quite expensive, but the kind of it's a household thing.
Yeah, and they're very much like need to be installed, very high price point. Um, they're trying to target more like um, the wellness centers and the fitness
Okay.
centers and the uh, larger corporate clients and things like that. But they do have a consumer line that is, probably around, I think it's around 10,000 US dollars,
Okay.
is kind of the entry point for that. But yeah, they're up there. Yeah.
And then the next stage, and I've never done this. I think I've done it actually in the ocean in Sweden, but never done it in my own ice bath. Is head under the water, because that's a big step. And again, I guess I recommend people don't do that alone if they're doing it for the first time. But talk about what's going through your mind at that point, like whether you do it or not, and it's a temptation to think, well, I've done enough. I'm in there. I don't need more suffering.
Yeah, I can't say I fully understand the science behind it. There, from what I've read, it triggers what's called the mammalian dive instinct. And what that fully does, I don't know. But I have noticed when I put my head under, I do feel like I've fully experienced it.
Okay.
And I do feel like there's even more of a physiological response. There's even more of a mental health mood improvement for me in the hours afterwards. So I don't know good or bad whether you should not. I just know from my experience, I always feel like I like to do it. I don't do it right in the beginning, because usually in the beginning you're going to be fighting to get control of your breathing, and so you don't want to go head under immediately as you gasp for air and you're just trying to get everything back under control. So I usually save it for midway through or even at the end. I'll dunk my head.
I feel that I might have heard, I think it was on the Huberman podcast, that there is, and he talked about this dive instinct or dive reflex, the idea that it's actually useful to do it at the very beginning, perhaps, and it actually makes it less painful. So maybe it doesn't create any more benefits beyond the fact it makes the rest of the experience less painful.
Interesting. Could be. Yeah.
But maybe I've made it up.
I need to go back and listen to the podcast again.
Or maybe actually, it numbs the experience. Perhaps actually what you want is the experience to be more painful and more challenging, and then you dunk at the end.
Yeah. Maybe the beginning, it helps you adapt quicker, is my guess.
And now deciding when to get out. Because once you're in it, I guess you know that it's going to get a little bit easier to some degree, maybe less so in a river because there is this constant influx of even more cold. But how would one decide when to get out? When is enough? Do you base it on time? I know you say, generally speaking, you're just in there for too long. But how do you decide when to get out?
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of things. I usually try and tell people anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes, and just long enough that you can get your breathing under control. You feel that your heart rate has come back down to baseline, because you want to fully go through that fight or flight, that cold shock, in order to reap the benefits of the feel good endorphins after. So you want to stay in there at least long enough to get everything back under control, feel like you have all your faculties in order, your cognitive function is back, because that's another thing that happens, right? Is your cognitive function declines immediately as you go in, and it's a little bit harder to think and to focus and to hear people talking. And so feeling like you're present again and you're there and you have everything back under control, that's usually when it's good to get out. Now, it also depends on the temperature too. The lower the temperature, the shorter your time should probably be. If your temperature is much higher, if it's 12, 13 Celsius, 55, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, you might want to stay in there a little bit longer to really get cold. So it just kind of depends on those factors. It can even depend on the time of day and whether you've had anything to eat, if your blood sugar's low. All of those things are going to make it a little bit more intense of an experience for you. So that's why first thing in the morning, I think, is much harder than if you were to do it mid-afternoon, is because you wake up, you're fasted, your core body temperature is lower upon waking up, and all of those factors kind of combined make it much more difficult to get yourself in the cold like that.
Moving in a slightly different direction now.
Okay.
Talking about like the social media aspect of things, what's your goal for that? And when I say what's your goal for that, I'm not talking about you want to make money from it, you want to be famous. But what is the message ultimately you're trying to spread? If there is a reason for your account existing, what is it?
It's always been around mental health. I felt like the cold was the vehicle by which I could discuss mental health. And I think the ultimate goal, because I've struggled with this so much in my life, was thinking I was the only one who felt a certain way, who dealt with a certain challenge, who took a certain medication, who struggled with comparisons. I mean, all of those things. And I think there are so many folks out there who don't quite have the resources, the friends, the experiences on a day to day to help them to come to those same conclusions. And I would love to provide a page, provide a channel, an outlet for folks to go, that's me. Like it's somebody else. And to try and over time form some sort of just connection with folks who can then feel like they can go and provide a similar idea to others.
Mm.
I just for some reason I feel so strongly about true awareness around mental health in general. Just any type of condition someone's, dealing with. Like, can we get folks to realize they're not alone? I didn't meet someone else with Tourette syndrome until I was 18.
Wow.
I mean, and so like in my personal life, I don't think I've shared this before. Um, I my therapist thinks I have chronic PTSD from years and years of thinking I was the most different, the most unique, the most broken human being because I was the only one going through a certain struggle. And it was almost a full decade before I met anyone else who had Tourette's. And this whole idea underneath was that I was this broken, different, weird child because I didn't have anyone else who was even slightly like that.
Mm.
And I had four siblings who somehow all came out without Tourette's and without anything like that. And so I think that's what's kind of starting this this idea or this push for me to just try and get folks to connect more on the subject and realize they're not alone.
What a wonderful cause. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure, like, so many people will say it that you'll affect the course of their life, especially young people. I don't know if you're on TikTok as well, where more of the young people reside. I'm sure there's plenty on Instagram as well. Uh, but the fact that you're doing what you're doing could change everything for them, and it's all worth it, isn't it? If there's one person whose course of their life changes thanks to you, uh, it's all worth it. And that's the beauty of, I guess, doing any work in the wellness sector, whatever that means, is that often you will never realize a change you make. You'll have, I'm sure, people write nice things and share little anecdotes. But I imagine the people you affect the most, you've got no idea, and you will never know them. Uh, but you will be affecting them. And yeah, thank you for doing that work.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Means a lot.
And
So,
then, as a little final thing, like, is there anything else that's helped you on your journey? When I say anything that's helped you, like little things, whether it be a quote that's guided you, a book, an author, music, I know is a big part of your life. Like, is there anything else that has supported you on your path and continues to do so?
yeah, I think therapy has been huge. Um, very hard work, but having a connection with other people and talking to other people about it has what's helped me to improve over time. I feel like not wanting to have those conversations and keeping it all internal is just a recipe for no growth and no
Mm.
change. And I think that's been really important. Um, I had another one and I just forgot it.
Is
But
it is it anything more alongside those things, like more cultural, as in like a music or a book, or like that you found solace in?
no.
No,
Um,
I was going. I know Beyonce track that's guided you through some hard times.
yeah. It's it really has been around stepping outside of my comfort zone in terms of socializing and trying to develop friendships.
Mm,
The amount of I'm so close to my mom. Probably because of because she was the one that was, you know, trying to handle everything when I was a kid and figure out how to help me to cope and to navigate it. Um, but what she's taught me is it's just keep trying anything, anything. Just keep trying. And that's been very well demonstrated just throughout my life. And she has lived by that. And it's caused me to do the same is you can't change if you don't change. And you need to reach out, you need to branch out. Um, and that's how cold plunging started, right? Was
Mm.
I needed to try something, anything new, to try and help and to find something that I could grasp onto. And so that's just been a huge thing for me is just mustering up the courage to do something new, to try something new.
There's so much in those two words. Those simple two words of keep trying. There's accountability. There's hope. It's taking ownership of your own life. It's a nice tattoo to have. Keep trying. Keep trying. So simple. Thank you so much for being so open and for coming on. Is there anything you want to share with people about kind of where to find you or anything you have on, etc. beyond cold? And guys, sorry if you can hear little alerts. Our little baby is crying. So if that's appeared on the podcast, apologies. I think he's teething. He's going through his own little challenge at the
Yeah,
moment.
very, very faintly I'm hearing it, but
Apologies.
you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. It's Cold Plunge Cam. That's my those are my channels. I really haven't done anything outside of that for now, which is yeah, I probably should. But
You don't no,
y-
no, you don't need to. Just do
yeah,
keep doing what you're doing. Because the moment you turn it into hard work, everything changes.
yeah,
Everything changes, and like so many people will tell you, well, you could make money from doing this, or you could start an amazing YouTube channel, and then suddenly you're paying multiple people to help you create content, and it becomes stress, and and you lose it. So keep doing what you are, and I think in a way that aligns.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you so much
means
for
a
that.
lot.
Honestly unbalanced.